Hello, everybody. This is Paul Herman, the Prince of Motivation and host of Zaka Presents My Journey. We're creating this vulnerable and positive platform where you can get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today, our guest is interior designer Hema Persad. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. I know that the listeners are dying to hear your story and even myself, I know you had a law background and you switched over to fashion and then also interior designing. But before we kind of get into that, area right there, I really want to kind of peel back a little bit and hear a little bit more about your background. Like, where is your family from? Where do you originate from? If we could get into that.
Okay. Yeah, cool. I was born in Toronto, Canada, and I lived there till I was about 11. My parents are both Guyanese. We're West Indian.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have a big extended family in Toronto, New York. All the hot spots for all the Guyanese people. When we moved to Florida when I was 11 because my parents divorced and my mom got a new job there. So I have two younger sisters, so the four of us moved to Tampa, and I did my middle school, high school, college, and law school all in Florida before coming out to LA to pursue fashion styling, which we will obviously get into. But yeah, I'm a Canadian. Guyanese.
Could you tell us a little bit more about that culture, the Guyanese culture? I mean, obviously Caribbean people, are very well known for entertainment, music, and honestly good food as well too. So could you tell us a little bit about the culture?
Yeah, so we're Indo-Caribbean, and actually we were, growing up, my family, everybody, we used to call ourselves the circus because everybody has some kind of musical or dance talent. Me and a lot of my female cousins, we did Indian dancing. My aunt actually ran, and my cousin still runs a really large dance school in Toronto called Tarana Dance, and they were the first West Indian-owned Indian classical dance school in Toronto. She started that in the late 80s. And then, a lot of the young men in my family played an instrument. So my cousin plays tabla. I've had other, they all play something. My aunts sing, so we're pretty involved in the Indian culture. And then of course there's the non-Indian side of the soca music and carnival and caravana and all of that, which we're always heavily involved in and always attend. I've been to Trinidad twice for carnival. My husband is
Okay.
Honey, yes, he's very proud.
All Trinity to the they would every time carnival would come around, they'd be like Trinity to the bone.
Trinity to the bone. Yeah, all of that.
Yes.
But the nice part about being West Indian, Guyanese, Indo-Caribbean, whatever, is that we get to kind of straddle both cultures. Being Indian and we're Hindu and religious, but then there's this, fun, entertaining, party side, all our basement bashment parties growing up were my mom was the DJ, believe it or not. She had a record player and she would play Babla and Kanchan and all these soca songs. And, it was good times. I used to look at I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I would come back from Christmas holidays and talk to my white friends and be like, hey, so how was your holiday? And it would just sound so boring. I'm like, oh, you didn't have a party in the basement? Wow. What did you do New Year's Eve? You just stayed home?
We sat by the fireplace. We relaxed. Hot cocoa.
We were, up till 3-4 o'clock, even as kids, just dancing, partying in the basement. When white people say dance party, I don't get it because I'm like, isn't every party a dance party? What does that mean?
And that is the culture. The culture. You come from an environment where music and fashion also was a part of that. If you think about it, back in carnival, the outfits were very elaborate. People would come from far with the most elaborate outfits and costumes and stuff. But again, it was for that day and it was very special. So I'm assuming at some point in time as a young child, you kind of picked up a little bit of that to kind of carry on and not knowing that it would lead you to something else.
I did. And I was actually always into Indian clothes too. We would wear a lot of Indian clothes for weddings and the temple and all these things. At one point, I really thought I was going to do something with that. But when I was a kid, I always was very concerned about my outfits from a very young age. I wasn't really allowed to do much because my parents were a little bit strict, so it's not like I could wear whatever I wanted. But it's always been, for as long as I could remember, I always cared very much about how I dressed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You know what I'm saying? You got to keep a little style on you right there.
Yeah.
When you were growing up, did you have any goals or any aspirations as a young lady?
For my career or
Yeah, as for your career, you know, obviously law came up and then obviously interior design and in fashion. But like when you was as a young child coming up, like, you know, sometimes people say, so what do you want to be when you get older? Was
yeah.
there something you were shooting for? Was law that thing?
Law was that thing. My father is an attorney, and it just sounded good. I mean, I didn't know that you could have a job in fashion. No one, ever, like in our community, in our culture, no one really ever gives you that option or says like, hey, you could do this job, and like, what's that saying? If you can't see it, you can't be it. So the things that were sort of rewarded or encouraged or safe things that make a lot of money, like lawyer, doctor. Both my parents, before my dad went to law school, they both worked at IBM. He was an engineer, and my mother went to college for computer science. So it was always like, follow the straight path, make money, and this is how you do it. These 3 or 4 options.
Well, you got to remember too, also Caribbean culture, parents coming over here from the Caribbean, it does get into that situation where they're like, look, you got to follow the lead, right?
Sure.
Doctor, lawyer, fireman, policeman, whatever it is, we need to know that you're going to follow in those footsteps. So you wouldn't say that your father kind of inspired you to kind of pursue law a little bit more?
I wouldn't say inspire. We're not very close, but inspire is not the word. More like, well, I don't like blood, so I'm not going to be a doctor.
Okay.
I don't like math, so I'm not going to be an accountant. I actually really liked reading and writing. I was always reading books and writing things and whatever. And so I just felt like, okay, well, lawyer is it. It's just the path that was laid out for me, and I took it.
Mm-hmm. And as time progressed, like you just listened to the universe, you were like, okay, well, this is somewhat around the thing that I should be doing. And then as time progressed, you went into law school, and I know you came out of law school and you were practicing for 7 years. Could you tell us about your law experience? Like, how was schooling for you coming up?
The whole thing was easy, but also I was never happy doing it. So I guess in hindsight, I probably should have bowed out earlier, but I just kept going because it was like, this is what you're supposed to do. I'm very much like a person who checks boxes, or I was at that time. And I just always wanted to be like doing the right thing and be responsible. And so, I just kept going. Law school is really difficult, but I got through it. And then when I passed the bar and started practicing, I got into commercial litigation, a lot of banking. I represented Wells Fargo and a lot of big lenders. So it was always like, lending and money related and bankruptcy and that kind of thing. And it was also miserable. I never liked it. I was just good at it. And so I just kept doing it.
And at that point in time, you mentioned some big corporations that you were working with. That's when you feel like you're just a number at that point in time. You're not really making that connection. I can see where there's a significant difference. And we're getting to that a little bit more about when you're a fashion designer, how you work closely with that person, right? And building that relationship and giving them their style, to then being over here, working in this firm with a large company and just being like, look, I'm just going through these files for you guys and not building that connection.
It was partially that. And also when I graduated law school, it was 2008. The economy had just collapsed. The mortgage crisis was like taking over America. And so I was representing these big banks, basically foreclosing on commercial properties and like ruining people's lives. It felt like ruining people's lives on a daily basis, So at the time I was like maybe 26, 27 years old. And so for a young woman working in a primarily white male dominated environment, doing this kind of like soul sucking work, it was not the best environment for me.
And what kept you motivated during that time?
Money, which as we all know that's not the move. Like that's not going to last.
Mm-hmm.
But it was money. I wanted to, at that time too, I was like, well, if I'm going to do this job and make this money, I'm going to have all the nice things. So I bought a Range Rover, I bought the bags, I bought the sunglasses, we went on the trips. Like I did all of that to try to justify the work I was doing in the paycheck.
Were you working late hours? Like, how was that experience?
It wasn't necessarily late hours, but it was all the time. And then when you work in a law firm, you have like a minimum billable hour requirement that you have to hit. And so there were weeks where it was a lot, and then weeks where I would go on vacation, but then come back and have to make up for it. So yeah, it was heavy. It was a lot.
I could only imagine the amount of stress. I mean, my mother always told me I was going to be a lawyer at one point. I was like, Mom, I don't know if I could do that.
The funny part is now, as an interior designer, I work harder than I've ever worked in my life, but it's for me. And so there's a different feeling.
That's true. It is always rewarding when you're working for yourself.
Yeah.
Because you get to see full circle exactly what's happening. It's not like you got to pass it on to the next person, and the energy is kind of like far away from the source. Right. Now, when you were in law, and obviously through that experience, like, were there any obstacles that you faced, in your law journey?
I mean, many. I got cut down a lot because, one of the things that you learn in your first job, no matter, cut down is maybe a strong way to say it, but there were a lot of things that law school does not teach you that I just had to learn in the real world. And I think a lot of people go through this with their first job. So I had to learn how to communicate effectively. I remember one time my supervising shareholder came in and he was like, your emails are too abrupt. You need to learn how to soften them because we're managing clients here and they want to feel the love. Like all those little lessons you learn about how to communicate with people and how to articulate yourself and how to, negotiate. I mean, I would, you lose a lot of cases and you win a lot. And every time I lost, I would be so angry, but there's always a lesson there. And the big lesson was learning that you lose some, you win some, and then you just need to keep it pushing, keep moving.
And I like how you talked about lessons. What was something that you learned about yourself during the time of you practicing law?
The big thing I learned is that I'm a very straightforward, abrupt person, but you really do have to learn how to articulate things in a way so that they will be received well. You can't just say things however you want to say them. So over the years, and I'm still working on this every day, I have had to learn how to translate what's in my head into a palatable way that other people can accept, because that's how you get what you want. I used to be like, oh, I'm just going to say what I want, and this is me, and take it how, they can take it or leave it. I'm not changing. And then, as I got older, I had to sort of understand you need to know your audience and speak to them.
And I'm assuming the audience changes every time in the courtroom.
Yes. Well, no, actually, because you're seeing the same attorneys and judges generally, at least in bankruptcy. That's kind of how it works. It's kind of a small unit within the larger community, but that's why it's even more important because, deals get worked out based on your relationships with people. And so I guess the big lesson was you need to build relationships with people because that's ultimately what's going to get you what you want. And this saying things however you want is not going to get you there.
Mm-hmm. And building relationships. Let's get into that right now. Building relationships. You got into building relationships in the law area, the practice and stuff like that. But then I want to say maybe 2014, from looking at this bio, in 2014, you made this switch. Could you just kind of just help me understand how do you go from law to then switching into fashion? Where was that? Were you picking up books in the meantime? Were you reading on your spare time? Were you going to fashion shows and then prepping yourself in the transition?
No, nothing. There is no prepping yourself. So in 2011, I had my first daughter, and in 2012, I had my second daughter, and work was getting progressively more unhappy for me. And I remember having these two babies and coming home from my job and not feeling like I could turn it off and connect with them, because what I was doing with all my banking clients or whatever. Like I would have grown men on the phone crying to me about how I was like working for the devil and ruining their lives. And then I had to come home and be a mom to some baby girls, So it was just time for me to figure something else. I was so unhappy. I remember my husband, saying, please, like, figure it out. What do you need? What else can you do? We will do it. Just be happy, So I sat and thought about like what I always wanted to do, and I always wanted to work in fashion. I didn't really know what the jobs were or how you made money. I think if you don't work in fashion, it's kind of like a big secret. Like nobody really knows what the jobs are or how you make money, So I did some Googling, and I used to watch that show, The Rachel Zoe Project. And I was like, stylist, like that, I think I could do that, So I would like cold email stylists on the internet. Back then there wasn't much, but a couple people responded and they would be like, hey, the work is in New York or LA. Good luck to you in Florida. It's not, they were very nice about it, but they were like, if you're not in New York or LA, it's not a job.
True.
So I said to my husband, I was like, I think we need to move. I'm not moving to New York because we'll be really poor. We can't afford to, for me to start over at something and raise children in New York. That just seemed insane. Plus the type of work is different. Like through my research and emailing people and just, Googling, I learned that in New York, the fashion work is fashion shows and like companies. And in LA, it's celebrities and advertising. And to me, that's where I wanted to be because I felt like there were more opportunities here in LA. So my sister was already living here. I came out to visit her, fell in love with LA. If anybody's ever been to LA, it's like when you come here the first time, it's like, it is La La Land. It is a magical place. And I came back home from that trip and told my husband, I said, I think we should move to LA so I can do this. And he just was like, okay, that's what we're going to do. So it took a little time. We both started applying for jobs. He works in wine and spirits. And so he ended up actually getting a job first. I did not want to take the California bar because I had no intention of being a lawyer once I got here. So we figured he would move and then I would sell the house and come with the kids later. And that it would be like this transition period. That did not happen because one day I listed my house on Zillow and the next day someone bought it for my full asking price. I didn't even have time to like,
no prep. No prep. Gotta go.
Had to go. So I went into my boss the next day, or this was Saturday, so Monday. And I was like, I didn't tell him. I wasn't going to tell anybody what I was doing. That, to go be a stylist or anything like that. But I said, my husband got a job in California. I have to move. And he just looks at me. He's like, we can't lose you on this Wells Fargo thing. Can you work remotely? Which is something my firm never did. And he said, our LA office is opening next month. And I was like, what? We have an LA office? What are you saying? Like the whole thing was wild. And so long story short, my sister found us an apartment here. We never saw it. We just came and moved in. It worked out great. And they set me up with a home office. We had 30 days to figure all this out. And so by June, this was all happening beginning of May. By June, I was here in LA working remotely for my same firm. And my husband was at his job.
Now, how were you guys juggling that? I'm assuming you said 2 kids. How are you guys juggling all of this? Like, that seems like a lot.
It was a lot. Our parents are very helpful. And so they still live in Florida. They handled the kids while we made the move. And then they brought them a couple weeks later and we got them in daycare.
Okay. I was like, wow, that seems like a lot to be. You just like, you put it up for the offer. And then all of a sudden you're like, you tell your boss, it's like,
literally
it's like one thing after the next.
Like it was like nothing happened for 6 months and then everything happened all at once.
And I think that was the universal and, welcome to the industry.
Yeah, pretty much.
Because that's how it goes in the industry. You're like, you're waiting for that one gig or that second gig or that third, that call
and then
back.
It snowballs. Yeah.
And then
that is how
all of a sudden, boom, work starts coming in and things start moving.
Yeah.
Now, in this whole time frame, like obviously you had to go speak to your boss, you had to make a couple of changes, leave your kids with your parents at that time. Did you feel any fear? Like any type of those, like that thought process go in, like self-doubt, saying like, this might not be the thing for me and my family?
The whole time. Like, and there have been moments, like there were many moments even after, as a stylist where I felt that. And also some family members were very supportive and other family members were like, what the hell are you doing? Like everybody's going to have their opinion on what you're doing because they are also afraid and they project their fears onto you.
True. Yep.
So I just was like, the wheels are in motion. Like I can't, once that our house sold and, we're pulling out the driveway with our truck full of stuff and all of that, like, yeah, driving across the country with the car and all of that. Like I had fear and doubt the whole time. And I just was like, I'm in it. I'm just going to keep going,
And you were successful as an attorney. So I could definitely imagine the amount of fear. Yeah. And you kind of like influence your husband on the low to kind of like get the job out. You're like, honey, look, so I really want to do something, but I want you to help me out. I want you to go first. I'll come second and the kids will come third.
Yeah.
That's the game plan. Mm-hmm. Shout out to your husband. Shout out to your husband.
He is actually now my business partner in my interior design business.
Look at that. Treaty to the bone.
He's the best. He's truly the best dad, the best husband. I could not do any of this without him.
And that is amazing when you do have a partnership like that, whether it be a husband, significant other, or having a business partner like that, having that connection where someone's going to hold you down, especially when you're kind of like falling behind on, life, that transitional period is very hard. And especially as a mother.
Yeah. I mean, shortly after, maybe 8 months after we moved to LA, me and my boss got in a big falling out and he fired me. So I went, my legal boss. So I went from a safe transition with a 6-figure income. I had started interning with celebrity stylists here so I could get my feet wet and make contacts. And I was like, okay, this is good. And then we got in a really big fight and he fired me. And I went from like 6 figures to $0 overnight.
And how was that mentally for you?
I mean, it was horrible. I do not recommend. And that is my number one piece of advice to anybody who wants to transition careers is like, find a way to pay your bills until you really feel like you can sustain yourself with this new thing that you're doing, and again, that was the ultimate lesson. I popped off. My boss was in the wrong looking back, but I popped off at the mouth and I shouldn't have,
So that Caribbean just came out of you right there. She's like, hold up. We're not dancing. I'm gonna dance with my mouth right now. Yeah. And I'm gonna let you know that this ain't going down. And obviously that's a lesson learned, something that you learned about yourself. And that was probably something where you have taken on to your career now of being like a stylist and stuff. So you say you were interning, you went from 6 figures to interning. That mentally could throw anybody off.
Yeah.
Because now you're interning for free. You're doing endless amount of hours. And I'm assuming your family members and friends, close friends are probably like, honey, what are you doing?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of them didn't even know at the time. And a lot of people were like, what are you doing? And again, it was my husband who was like, we'll be okay. I mean, we both had panic moments, obviously, but we made it work, and it was a very, this was 2015. So I always think about 2015 as the year that really tested our marriage and also taught me how to live on very little money, which I think is an important lesson for anybody to learn, especially if you're going to go into your own thing, because if you can't manage like a little bit of money, you definitely can't manage a lot of money.
And when you got into the industry, the fashion industry, like what gave you the courage to keep on pursuing it?
Well, I felt like I was making these little gains every time. Like my first day at my first internship, I was on set for an Esquire magazine cover shoot with Lily Aldridge. And that kind of thing only happens in LA, where like out of nowhere, you can find yourself in these very extraordinary situations with big celebrities. I hear these stories all the time. And so things just kept happening. I remember around Easter 2015, I got a random phone call from the Kardashian stylist, Monica Rose, at the time. She's not their stylist anymore. And she was like, I heard you're good. Can you work today? And that's like became my gig, one of my main gigs for the rest of the year. So things just kept happening that were really amazing. And I just kept going, even though the money was not great. Like the experiences I was getting were really great. And I felt like it was going somewhere.
Mm. Now, going back to when you said corporate America, you talked about relationships, right? And like how you were working with these large organizations and companies. Now you're starting to work with individuals. How did you develop that relationship? You know, letting someone trust you with their style, their fashion. How did that come about?
Well, it's like anything else. You start, with a fitting and talking to them and trying to like understand what they're trying to achieve, because a lot of people see themselves in a completely different way than how I see them or how the world sees them. A lot of people have body image issues or whatever, but I guess building up trust and relationships just comes with, listening and really making it about the client and not about you and your ego and what you want to be doing. Does that answer your question?
No, it does. It does.
Yeah.
When you're solely working on helping someone like really achieve their goal, like you got to kind of take your ego out of it. You have
100%.
You have to step away from, because again, it's their style, it's their fashion.
It's their style, it's they're paying you, they're paying you for your expertise. And so you should also never forget that, because a lot of times clients will try and like railroad the situation, and you kind of have to, in a nice way, rein them back in, save them from themselves in a way. But, it's all about communication and listening, and then like trying to understand what is their real objective here,
Now, what was that first experience with that first client? Like, could you walk us through that? Like, obviously you were interning, but there was a point in time when you actually had to start developing your own clientele.
Yeah. I can't remember my first client. I really can't remember it. It's like so many things happened at once. I would have like my own magazine shoots. So if you ever wanted to get into styling, you have to start by building a portfolio. And so, that involves doing a lot of like test shoots and work for free. I remember my first magazine shoot. I think it was this magazine that's now doing really well. It's called A Book Of. And getting all these clothes and leveraging all the relationships I had built with PR and fashion people through assisting. And them just being really supportive of me going off on my own and doing my own thing and like lending me clothes for my shoot and all of that. And I remember wrapping the shoot and feeling really exhilarated, and it boosts your confidence, because before that I was just an assistant, and, you're proud of your work, but you can't really take credit for your work because you're helping another stylist do their work. But there's a real sense of collaboration, especially on magazine shoots or when you're dressing a celebrity or whatever, because it's like you and the hair and makeup all working together to like create this image. And when that person goes out on the red carpet or when those magazine photos come out, you just feel like, so proud. Like, yeah, I did that, like it's such a nice feeling to collaborate with other creative people.
It's rewarding, especially when everyone shares the same energy.
Yeah, exactly.
You could be on a set with, someone's like, this is how I do it. And this one's like, this is how I do it. But, when you're on a set with everyone working towards a common goal, the creativity and the productivity of it all really does come out to be something. When you're in that zone, like when did you start to realize that you were really good at what you were doing?
I never felt good. I don't know. I think creative people go through that too. Like as a stylist, people will be like, I love your work. And in my mind, I'd be like, you do? Really? Like, I don't know. It's just, I'm very, very critical of myself. And it's another thing that I really need to work on. I can never tell if my work is objectively good or not. To me, I measure it by, is my client happy? Do they feel good? Sometimes I look at photos and I'm like, oh, I would have done this different or that different, but you can't dwell on that. But I don't know that I would. I don't know. I never feel really good. I think that will plague me the rest of my life.
It's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. I don't think there's no right or wrong way for that. I think that when you're as an artist, at the end of the day, whether it be in this industry or that industry, it's very hard sometimes to kind of give yourself the credit that you need and deserve.
It's very hard. It's like, very hard.
Sometimes some people might get a little gassed up, and they might just.
They gas up people, a lot of people. I don't know if it's fake or not, but that was one of the things I always admired or looked at other stylists or even people on Instagram all day. I'm like, wow, like I wish I could, promote myself this way. And I'm trying to get better at it, but I don't know. I always am very critical of my own stuff.
Now, how did you not lose yourself in this industry? Let's talk about that, because you're in an industry that's changing every single day. And there's so many copycats, carbon copies. Someone's like, well, I think she got the job by doing this and he got the job by doing this. How did you stay true to you?
I think because I have a husband and 2 children at home, I think that is really how. Because I would, for example, I worked a year with Kate Hudson's team and, I would go on a private plane with her to San Francisco for the day or whatever, and then come home and then my kids are still like, mommy, wipe my butt, So I think like just having a life outside of it where you have people who really are here for you, who you trust, who keep you humble. I think that's how, because otherwise it's very easy to get swallowed up. I see it all the time.
Now, do you feel that your legal background has helped you in this industry?
It helped me in the sense that I was never afraid to negotiate or advocate for myself. And so I always got paid. A lot of my creative friends have a lot of struggles getting paid for their work. And that was never a problem of mine.
And how do you feel as a woman of color to be able to negotiate at that level?
I think I wish I could help more women do it because I think I've seen a lot of women and people of color especially struggle with that, just asking for more, asking for what you're worth. And I see a lot of like, oh, I'm just happy to be here representing for my people or whatever. And I'm like, no. It's more than that. You're not just here to represent. You're here because you are a skilled person who deserves compensation.
Mm-hmm. And some people, and especially in the industry, you're kind of trained not to speak up sometimes, because if you do that, sometimes it's going to end up with you getting kicked off of the job.
Yeah. And I think, again, it goes back to the way you say things and the relationships you've built and, not being like a bully about it or to, it's just a way to say things that sort of get people on your side, and it's like, you lead with something nice and then you sort of, I don't know how to describe it. Let me think. You lead with, the relationship building, really try and sincerely try and get to know people and where they're coming from. And then you come in with your ask. And then I always tell people when you're negotiating, or this is what I would tell my kids anyway, you make the reasons about a larger purpose, not yourself. For example, some people negotiate and they say, well, I have this issue and I have this education and I have that and blah, blah, blah. I think it's always more effective in negotiation when you say things like, well, cost of living is this, or this rate will affect this many people because this is what the situation is, like on a more global level. Does that make sense?
No, that's amazing.
About you.
Amazing thought process right there. That's it. Yeah. It takes it off of you and brings it back to like something that the individual themselves is probably going through. Gas prices,
exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
I might have not gone to the same school as you, but we all are suffering from the same gas prices.
Exactly it. And I think in negotiation, that always helps because nobody cares about you and your problems because everybody has their own problems. So like you just said, if you make it about everybody's problem and say, well, other people might be having this problem or need this amount of money because of X, Y, and Z that we're all going through right now, it's always more successful.
Now, as a woman of color, like how do you feel you'll be able to help mentor or coach other women to do the same thing? Do you feel like in the near future that's something you could do, or would like to do?
I would like to. I don't really know how. I don't have much more time for anything one-on-one between my children and my clients. But if there were a larger platform, like, I don't know, a TV show or whatever, think more podcasts, things like that, maybe a book one day. I would love to help women. I'm actually really, because of my experience as an attorney representing lenders and just seeing how people navigate our banking and lending system completely clueless, I would really like to teach women and children about how to manage money and how to, make capital work for them, because I think that they are largely left out of the conversation. And I even have friends who are in their mid 30s, women who have no idea even like what a lender is, how you get a loan, like none of that, and it's bothersome to me because that's how this whole country functions.
True. Leveraging.
Yeah.
And if you understand that word and you know how to negotiate, that definitely would help out any individual in any type of profession at the end, whether it be law, whether it be fashion, interior design. And now, as you're in this industry, like it is very competitive, and obviously time is money. How do you, deal with the level of stress and the anxiety that might come up from working on a job or working with a group of people who are just like either moving at a faster pace or even just maybe moving at a slower pace than you?
I don't work in styling anymore. I actually left to pursue interior design full time in December. But in either case, how do I manage the stress? I now in my contracts have like business hours. I never used to. So for all my interior design clients, their expectation is set that like between the hours of 9 and 6, they'll get a response, but anything weekdays, but anything beyond that is next business day. Sorry about it. There are no such thing as a design emergency. With styling, it was more difficult because quite honestly, celebrities don't care about your time. So there was no managing stress. My husband, we were not watching, but like sort of on Instagram, looking at some of the Oscars coverage. And he's like, I hated those days when you were involved in all that, because I would be gone, not sleeping, not eating, in a horrible mood for basically a month. It was horrible. I wasn't managing it well.
Okay. And now obviously you transition from the fashion to interior design, and what is some of the similarities that are in between the two, and like what's the main difference between the two?
The similarities are obviously, creating. The process starts in my mind, and then, actually bringing it to life. Like that is really the same. And I think I learned a lot from working in fashion about just like studying references and starting with a reference in order to like create a design, like I don't just pull it out of nowhere. I do my research, and I used to do that with fashion too. The differences are huge. Interior design is actually a very established industry, whereas celebrity styling is not. There are not really any rules there, but in interiors, there's a lot of rules. There's a lot of decorum, ethics, and professionalism. And so it resonates more with me because I came from law. And so this career path that fell on my lap, I did not expect it. Feels like it's like a really great blend of everything I've done up to this point.
And what inspired you to get into interior designing?
Nothing inspired me. One of my styling clients asked me to decorate her apartment. And it was in the middle of the pandemic, and I did it remotely. At first I was like, I don't do that. And she was like, your house is cute. Do mine. And I said, at first I kind of was like hesitant. And then, it was a pandemic. So I was like, okay, sure. Why not? So I did it. And she's an influencer. So we ended up working with a furniture company to get her some, free stuff or whatever in exchange for posting. And the pictures went everywhere. And out of nowhere, a whole bunch of people, existing clients, strangers on the internet, whoever, were like, you do this? Can you do my apartment? Can you do my place? Can you do my place? And I was just like, what? So I just started saying yes and doing it.
Now, do you have a team? Because you're saying the word yes. That sounds like a lot right there.
At first I didn't. And then, so now I have 2 design assistants. I'm bringing a new one on this week, actually, because me and my current were just drowning. And then my husband is the newest addition to our team. He is making time for me in his schedule to help me with all my operations stuff. He's basically like COO now.
Mm-hmm. And does he still work at the same job?
Yeah.
He
works from home. And so, we're no strangers to having multiple things going on. So far it's working.
Okay.
I'm hoping to be able to replace his salary and together, because we have a lot of plans for Q2, Q3, Q4 of this year and just sort of expanding on what I'm doing. So the goal is to eventually make it a family business and, bring him on full time.
You're breaking barriers. I just want to let you know that right now. You're really pushing through, from Canada to Florida, to LA, to law, to fashion, to interior design. And like, you're just like, it seems that like when you put your mind towards something from this conversation, which I'm hearing, and obviously the listeners as well too, like whenever you put your mind towards something and you really have that focus energy, it shows in your work ethic that it does happen. And
I guess so. I never thought about it. It always just felt like I'm very much like a nose to the grindstone person. And I when I tell the story or when I say it, it sounds crazy. But when I'm in it, it just feels like I'm just doing the work. And it's, it doesn't feel as like, whoa, as when you say it,
Mm-hmm. Now, how are you managing being a mom and all of this? Like, obviously, I know you said your husband helps out. I know you have some assistants, but like being a mom is its own category.
Yeah.
Like, how are you juggling that?
I mean, I'm probably better some days than not. We had a third kid in the middle of the pandemic. She's 2 now. So I have 3 girls. I have an 11-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And it's really difficult. What I try to do is carve out individual time for each of them, as much as I can, rather than try and do these big family things where nobody gets heard or gets any of my attention. And I think that works. Like I'll take the older one out for lunch or the middle one out, to the park or to a movie. And then the baby and I, she demands my attention. So she generally gets it. But I think it's helped me balance each of their needs. I try to spend more one-on-one time than group time with my family.
Again, that relationships.
Yeah.
It goes back. You big on those relationships.
I am.
I hope the listeners are paying close attention to the success leaves clues. So building relationships, knowing how to say something the right way that people can receive it, but also building relationships. That is, I'm hearing that a lot in this conversation.
It's true. And it's, go ahead.
I was going to ask, like, could you walk us through like a process of like, if a client came to you now and said, hey, look, I know a lot of them came to you during the pandemic, but like if someone was to come to you now currently and say, like, I want to work with you, like, what does that process look like for you?
Well, first they send me pictures and, tell me a little bit about what they're trying to do. I vet them pretty heavily now before we actually ever get on the phone, because I just am inundated with business. And now that I'm also doing art direction for Property Brothers Forever Home, the time commitments there are a lot. And so in the beginning last year, I would take on kind of everything. And then this year I've had to be more selective. And I can also kind of spot now after, kind of talking to clients, like who's going to be a good client and who's not. So I try to get to the bottom of that through our first email interactions. So generally the process is people send me an email. I dig a little deeper into what they're trying to do. And if I feel like their budget and their ambitions are a fit, then we get on the phone, talk through my rates and the project a little more. And then I send a scope of work. They either approve it or reject it. And then we move into contract and deposit and working on the design.
You very like, you said, check the boxes.
I have to. I didn't, I learned a lot in the beginning and quickly. And, to run a profitable business, you can't be working with every person who wants to work with you. Everything is not, again, relationships. This is a long process. Designing someone's home or spaces in their home is a very intimate, personal, long process. And I learned from styling that if the relationship isn't there, the rapport isn't there, it's going to be miserable for everybody. It's not just, again, about a paycheck,
Now, you said a lot of amazing things tonight, and I appreciate you for sharing and opening up, not even just about the culture, but about your journey and like how it's actually evolved over the many years. Is there any like last words of advice that you want to give to the listeners? Someone listening right now, I know you talked about you would like to, at some point in time in your career, to help out other women understand how to utilize their voice, how to negotiate, what are some of the things that you want to kind of leave our listeners with?
I think that if you pay attention to your life, there are clues as far as what you should really be doing. And so when I say that, I mean, everybody has natural talents, and that's what you're really here for, what you should be doing. And chasing things that other people say you should chase is like never the move. And also chasing things just for money is not going to make you happy in the long term. So I think number one is pay attention to those clues. What's the thing that people are always asking you for? What's the thing that people are always asking you for advice on? Or what comes naturally to you that other people are constantly, seeking your help with? I think that's a big clue. As far as where you might want to focus if you're looking at changing careers and doing something different. And then I think another thing is like, it doesn't, you don't always have to go to school to learn something. Like I have no interior design training whatsoever. I have the school of life and everything that I've learned in my, previous experience that has lent itself really well to this. But you can't always formally educate yourself in something. Sometimes you just kind of got to like dive in, get your feet wet, talk to people, learn from other people who are doing it, and don't be afraid to reach out and ask questions because, people like me, if we have the time or whatever, are generally happy to like talk about what we do, because we've been there. We know what the struggle is.
Well, Hema, thank you
Oh, thank you.
For sharing and educating, dropping some gems. You mentioned about the whole like helping out in the near future, just to let you know that Zaka is going to be that platform, and it is that platform currently right now to help with mentoring larger groups and larger populations. So I know that we will be connected back with you in the near future at some point in time.
So. I would love to.
But your story is definitely inspirational, and it just goes to show to the listeners that like if you're unhappy with something, you can't sit there forever in it. You got to make moves, and sometimes, like you said, you just got to dive in and you got to take those risks. And with risk come rewards and some setbacks. Like you said, you went from 6 figures to having $0 in your bank account, if that's the case. But you still kept the drive. You still remembered your why, and you had a really good support team around you, whether it be your husband, your kids, and your closest friends and family members. So I commend you on doing that, because some people stay in that zone for a very long time and then blame everybody else for not making that move. So thank you for sharing it. If you want to hear about more stories like Hema, check us out on ZakaConnect.com or follow our feed Zaka wherever you listen to your podcasts.